Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, California Association of Museums Conference attendees, administrators, special guests, colleagues, and friends. I'm delighted to be opening this series of conference days in 2022, where your colleagues and coworkers from across the state will be offering their insights on the conference theme, Shifting Terrains. Here we are, 2 years into a global pandemic. I know you might be feeling so over the restrictions, wearing masks, and definitely Zoom, but I hope you had a chance to embrace the incredible opportunities offered by this pandemic. Maybe taking up new hobbies, getting fur babies, having human babies, time to recharge, connecting in new ways with family and friends, but most importantly, time to slow down, be introspective, and ask deep questions about yourself and these spaces we occupy in society. It is well timed that I can offer you my own words and thoughts on this topic, as I recently completed my master's in museum studies. And it is the pandemic that I have to thank for staving off FOMO, because let's face it, these last 2 years were the perfect time to go to school in a fully remote program. And for anyone who is scratching their head trying to decipher what I just said, FOMO means fear of missing out. In my final semester of school, I took a seminar course, and much like museum programming, it went from in-person to online with the pandemic. This seminar transformed what was supposed to be a 2-week on-site intensive, on the ground, visiting museums in an urban city of the US into a virtual 8-week online experience aptly titled Museums in a Changing Time. And it is from my program, my experiences in museums and life that I draw inspiration for my message to you today, as I've had so much time to think critically about our field as a whole, about where we have been, where we are going, and about the critical spaces of change which we find ourselves in right now. Because museums are, in fact, in a changing time. In order to think critically about this changing time, I would like to reflect with you on 4 questions for museums. The first, where have we been? There is an Akan symbol from Ghana, Sankofa, which essentially means go back and get it. Or to inform the future, we must look to the past. As I think about this word and museums, I ask myself, have we, big we, the royal we, all of us, explored and understood enough of museum past to chart the path to our collective future? I had the chance to dive in, and what I took away from that experience was more questions than answers, but also one indisputable fact. Museums were made by and for people. So let me give you a quick walkthrough of museums as I understood them, and give you some insights into what has deepened my reflections and understanding of these places we call museums. At the Temple of the Muses in Alexandria, we were repositories of knowledge and fuel for inspiration. In Europe, we were cabinets of curiosity, or Wunderkammer, that allowed the educated, wealthy, and elite to showcase their finds, or rather, what was stolen from their explorations of the world. We have been places for the poor and uneducated to be cultured and learned of the world outside their small bubbles of understanding. We were places that encouraged deep nationalism and connection to our politics, our people, our countries. We were spaces for amusement and entertainment where people othered by society could be put on display and gawked at. In the United States, we were storehouses and safe havens for vast art and science collections of the wealthy, who would require us to hold them in perpetuity. We were bequests from wealthy foreigners that ensured we would remain open and accessible to the people of the world so they continue to learn and explore our past and cultural patrimony. We were demonstrations of deep wealth by robber barons whose names would litter our buildings, our exhibition halls, and our collections. We were relatively hands-off until we decided to be intentionally hands-on. We were spaces that invited in families, school children, teachers, neighbors, donors, and benefactors to support our missions of educating, exhibiting, and collecting in order to amass great value with our members and audiences. This is just a quick snapshot, but since our inception, we have been so many things. So in all the spaces we have occupied as museums, What can we glean from this history that gives us insight to answer the next question? Where are we going? The biggest thing I take away from this history is we really haven't changed much since the beginning. There are more of us now. We have an impressive range of disciplines that we cover. Some of us have huge collections, and some of us don't. We want folks to visit us and be inspired, whether it's to be the next great visual artist or future technological innovators or future historians caring for our cultural patrimony. We still provide entertainment and have even come up with a new phrase, edutainment, to justify providing learning experiences and fun. We still cater to the wealthy and affluent, which sometimes includes their politics and beliefs. We still have a tendency to participate in the othering of people, and it has expanded from our collections and exhibitions to visitors, staff, and communities. If I can be honest with you all, many of these realizations made me sad and frustrated. But more importantly, they made me motivated to think about innovation in our field and what the future holds for museums. What we have learned from our history has motivated our colleagues to lean into the shifting terrain and challenge these historical norms with new insights into who we are and where we are going in the 21st century. Latanya Autry and Mike Morosky state plainly, museums are not neutral. Many of our colleagues came together to conceptualize museums as sites for social action, and they even developed a toolkit to help us work towards that. Our colleagues who are leaders, educators, exhibit developers, and activists told us we are empathetic spaces. Nina Simon tells us we are participatory, and that our museums are of, by, and for all people. Chris Taylor reminds us that we need to get our houses in order if we want to be truly inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible spaces. So let's return to this concept of Sankofa. To inform the future, we must look to the past. And let's look at what our colleagues are creating to challenge the norms that we have comfortably situated ourselves in and ask another question. How do we have to change? First, we have to acknowledge that our institutions are for all people, and that all is not the casual all of people who come to cultural institutions now or visit us as parts of field trips or who are already bought into what we are selling. The all people I speak of includes those who have never set foot in a cultural institution and could care less about how many pieces are in our collection or about our upcoming exhibitions, our fundraising efforts, our community outreach programs, or volunteering their time on a board or as a gallery attendant. If we started as spaces created by and for people, we need to dig deep and understand what being by and for all people is not just affluent white cisgender men and women. Our staff must be a reflection of our communities. Our boards must be a reflection of our communities. Our collections must be a reflection of our communities. Our exhibitions must be a reflection of our communities. And the stories we share must also be a reflection of those communities. Our programs must be a reflection of our communities. The very core of our identities as cultural institutions must be about those incredibly intersectional human beings, first and foremost, and then all of those other things. Which brings me to my next critical point about how we have to change. We need to think deeply about value. If we demonstrate to our communities that we value them, that we will show up for them, they will show up for us in incredible ways and demonstrate how much they value us. Just think about how we asked our members and donors to show up for us through fundraising efforts during the pandemic, so we could maintain relevancy in a time when, let's face it, cultural institutions were the last thing on people's minds, except ours, of course. We asked people who valued us to demonstrate that to us what we meant to them through monetary means so we could survive and continue to forge ahead with our missions in a time when we were close to the public and not generating revenue. Just imagine if we could step outside the safety and comfort of our buildings and be present for real-time events and crises happening in our communities. What would happen if we asked our community leaders and activists, what are your challenges, goals, and aspirations? How can we help? What can we do? Here are the resources we are connected to. Let's make this happen without the expectation of donate to our cause and become a member today. A dear colleague and friend of mine, Daniel Aguirre, reminded me recently of what happens when you show up for your communities and how they can demonstrate how they value you. When the city of San Diego wanted to majorly cut arts and culture funding, he was able to ask parents from Barrio Logan, a neighborhood part of ongoing programming that was of, by, and for them, to show up for the Fleet Science Center and Arts and Culture with their voices and speak of the value that we created in the lives of their families and their neighborhoods. They showed up and waited patiently to speak, even though there was no guarantee they would be able to do so. But they showed up. My last point, and this one is probably my favorite, as we are experiencing incredible burnout and exodus from the field. Our staff are communities we serve. And I want to let that point marinate for a minute. When Chris Taylor said, we need to get our houses in order, he likened it to the example of inviting people over to your home. You don't invite folks to your home when it's dirty, right? I mean, maybe you do, who am I to judge? But if you are having a party or celebrating a milestone like a graduation, a birth, wedding, death, anything, you want to make sure your house is in order. And we have to do the same. If we are going to work through being inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible spaces, we must reflect that inwards and outwards. Our staff, the folks who are teaching our programs, selling tickets, serving food, fixing toilets, guarding galleries, developing exhibitions, maintaining databases, running films, filling invoices, volunteering their time, managing and leading, showing up every day to support achieving the mission. These are communities we serve, and we must demonstrate to them how much we value them. Community engagement starts inside. And yes, you pay us, but that is a conversation for another day and another keynote. So this brings me to the last of the 4 questions about museums in a changing time. We have asked ourselves, where have we been? Where are we going? How do we have to change? And now, how do we command change? To be in the position where you can command is a very powerful position. I remember as a child when my father would tell me, stop making all that noise. I would stop. It wasn't a question. He wasn't asking me, Ashanti, do you want to be quiet? He was telling me with parental authority, a critical action for me to remain in his proximity. Lo and behold, I have figured out how to make a different kind of noise and ruckus in my adult life, and he would be so proud. But let's say to command is to make a statement of action, be it for yourself or for someone else. So how do we command change? Let's make statements of action about ourselves that are in line with how we have to change to pave a way to our collective future that has been informed by a history we have learned from. And these are not statements for your social media or 3-line statements for your website or reactionary knee-jerk statements to that thing that happened that we are so sorry about. I am talking about statements in the form of our missions, strategic plans, how and who we hire and what we value and how we demonstrate that. I was in a conversation recently about how we as a society are exceptionally talented at repeating our mistakes. And as cultural institutions in the midst of change, socially, politically, and economically, we can afford to not learn from the mistakes of our past because we run the risk of irrelevance and extinction if we do. So let's command our change. And when we do, we have to hold ourselves accountable to that change by asking our stakeholders, the many communities we serve, to hold us accountable. And if I may bring this full circle, I think about this incredible moment that we are in right now, a moment of transformation. We are 2 years into a pandemic that has given us an open door as cultural institutions to change. We just have to be willing to walk through that door and embrace the tools, the resources, the people that are already available to us to support navigating that change. We have to acknowledge the fear of change. Change means unknowns, uncharted waters, and asking difficult questions that may make us uncomfortable. And we don't like discomfort. But leaning into discomfort means we are giving ourselves an opportunity to grow. Change means entering into new territories that cannot be easily figured out by best practices, because what is best for another institution may not be the best for you, because we are as different as the communities we serve. Change means embracing mistakes, because we are going to make them. But mistakes offer us another opportunity to learn and grow. Fear of change, discomfort, mistakes. We cannot let these fears be barriers that stand in the way of becoming the people and the cultural institutions we need to be. We have to be open. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be brave. And we can't just be brave against our fears. We have to be brave and speak up, or maybe even stand up for what is right and for our communities, internally and externally, proving that we do not hide behind the veil of neutrality. I remember, as I'm sure you all do, when George Floyd was murdered. I remember feeling numb, exhausted, angry, emotional, and not because this was something new, but because this happened again. I remember the deluge of statements that flooded social media and websites in the days, weeks, and months after. Statements that said Black Lives Matter, statements of solidarity, statements in support of the protests, and the calls for justice and the outrage. But I also remember the silences. I remember inaction. I remember the allied performances. In this moment, being brave is not about making the statement. Being brave is taking action on the statement in the face of questions from donors, members, trustees, and holding fast and steady to the values of justice, because we serve communities of people who deserve justice. Sometimes these moments of bravery come from the top, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes leaders emerge from unexpected places, and it is these brave individuals who lean all the way in to their discomfort, because change does not happen if we do not take action. So I challenge all of you with love to lean all the way in and lead from wherever you are in your organizations. And not only must you lead from where you are, but you must be willing to follow from where you are, especially if you are at the top of the organization. Because leadership is about being willing to follow and creating the spaces to allow others to rise. And what better place to do that than from the formal seats of organizational leadership? This all sounds doable, right? Tomorrow, we're going to jump right back into our work and change everything. I am 76% optimist, now down 8 points since 2022. And I like to tell myself that we are heading in the right direction. But then the growing realist in me chimes in and says, sure, at the speed of a snail on a glacier. So no, we aren't going to change everything tomorrow. The change I am talking about is going to take time. And it is going to take a concerted effort. It is going to take all of us. It is going to be uncomfortable. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to learn from those mistakes. We are going to make more mistakes. And we are going to keep forging ahead in this 21st century to be the versions of ourselves that can truly say, we are for all people. You will be attending a CAM conference in San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Fresno, or Reading with the hope to learn something new, confirm something you already knew, acquire new tools to explore and experiment with, but most importantly, to make connections with others and build a community around this shifting terrain we are in. Come ready to engage in conversations, learn, ask questions, challenge norms, speak up. Come ready to slow down and reflect. Come ready to engage your fellow arts and culture leader and change agent, but most importantly, come ready to walk forward towards that door of change. There is no time like the present to create the future, and I look forward to a California museum's future with all of you. So let's go back and get it.